3 days out from his wedding, and his fiancée, Stephanie Scott, is nowhere to be seen.
I'm not seeing her before I go to sleep, or like talking to her, or just seeing her in general. It's baffling me, like, where could she be?
On Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2015, the quiet town of Leeton in New South Wales was getting ready for holiday celebrations. But inside Leeton High School, a terrific crime was about to happen that would shock the community forever. Stephanie Scott, a 26-year-old English teacher, had gone into school that morning to prepare lessons for her substitute. She was getting married in just a few days and wanted her students looked after while she enjoyed her honeymoon. It was a simple act of dedication. It would be her last. Working at the same school was a 24-year-old cleaner, Vincent Stanford. Outwardly quiet and withdrawn, Stanford had a very disturbing inner world that no one saw. He was more cruel than anyone could ever imagine. His computers had many violent searches. He kept notes of his fantasies about harming women. To everyone else, he was just the school janitor. To Stephanie, he was a stranger. When Stephanie walked into the building that morning, Stanford was already watching her. The school was empty, and the halls were silent. It was the perfect setting for what he had been planning. Then things took a whole new turn. As she left her classroom, he grabbed her, dragged her into a storage closet, and launched a savage attack. He did not simply drag her around. He did something worse. He punched her repeatedly, up to 40 blows, before stabbing her in the neck, severing her carotid artery. But the assault did not stop there. Evidence later showed that Stanford sexually assaulted her during or after the attack, an act of violence so cruel that it shocked even veteran detectives. His chilling admission in court was simple. He wanted to make sure she was dead. After the killing, Stanford's actions were too cool for a killer. He cleaned himself up, walked home, and ate a cheese sandwich with coffee. Hours later, he drove Stephanie's car, with her body inside, to Cocoparra National Park. But what he did after was more than horrific. There, he soaked her with fuel, set her remains to go off. He then got rid of what was left in the bushland. By the time her family realized she was missing, Stanford was already back at work. He was silent, expressionless, hiding the truth in plain sight. This was not a crime of passion. It was cold-blooded, pre-planned, and without motive beyond his own fantasies. A dedicated teacher, a beloved daughter, and a bride-to-be were erased in an act of senseless violence that would leave an entire nation reeling. But things got suspicious at a point. When Stephanie Scott did not come home on Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2015, her family knew something was wrong. She had told her fiancé, Aaron Leeson Woolley, that she would be at the school only for a short time. She just needed to organize lesson plans before their honeymoon. But the hours passed, and there was no word from her. Calls went unanswered. Messages were left unread. By evening, worry turned into panic. Aaron and Stephanie's family reported her missing to the police. At first, officers considered the possibility of a car accident or that she may have gotten delayed somewhere. But Aaron's demands that this was out of character and the beautiful wedding was just days away. So he convinced the investigators to treat the case with urgency. A missing bride-to-be, beloved in her small community, was not the kind of story that went unnoticed. Very quickly, Leeton was filled with fear and a lot of doubt. Things escalated quickly. The police began by tracing Stephanie's movements. They found things that shook them. Her car was gone, along with her handbag, raising a lot of red flags and doubts. The last confirmed sighting placed her at Leeton High School. Security checks showed that the building had been opened on Easter Sunday, when no one should have been there except staff with keys. That pointed investigators towards school employees. One name stood out: Vincent Stanford, the 24-year-old cleaner. When police questioned Stanford the next morning, his behavior was cold and detached. He admitted that he had been at the school, but claimed that he saw nothing unusual. But detectives noticed small inconsistencies, and his flat behavior and manners made them uneasy. Then came the chilling clue. Inside Stanford's home, officers discovered bloodstains in his car, along with disturbing items that hinted at violence. Even more damning were photographs on his phone. There were graphic images of Stephanie's body, taken after the attack.
You had 2 photos of the deceased body?
Yes.
Are those photographs of Stephanie?
Yes.
Can you tell me why you took those photographs of Stephanie?
I think I might have some mental problems.
The horror of what had happened became undeniable. Stanford had dragged Stephanie into a storage room, attacked her, and hidden her body inside the school before transporting it in her own car. Investigators now faced the urgent task of finding her remains. And then, shockingly, things took a turn. A breakthrough came when a witness reported seeing smoke and unusual activity in Cocoparra National Park. Police followed the lead and discovered a burned site in the bushland, and what they found there was terrific. Scattered among the ashes and waste were Stephanie's charred remains. It was a brutal confirmation of everyone's worst fears. The evidence trail was overwhelming. It brought both horror and terror to the minds of everyone. Blood traces in Stanford's vehicle matched Stephanie's DNA. Surveillance confirmed his movements on Easter Sunday. Forensics linked the burned site to materials from the school and from Stephanie's car, and those haunting photographs, which were kept on his device like trophies, tied him directly to the crime. What brought even more chills to everyone was something else. When confronted, Stanford confessed with chilling and calm simplicity. He said he had gone a little nuts and admitted to attacking, raping, and killing Stephanie before burning her body. He described making a sandwich and coffee afterward, as if it were just another ordinary day. That detail, perhaps more than any other, showed how much of a monstrous calm he had in him with which he committed the crime. For Aaron, Stephanie's family, and the entire community of Leeton, the discovery was shattering. A teacher adored by her students, a bride ready to walk down the aisle, had been brutally stolen from them by a man entrusted to sweep the same hallways where she taught. The discovery phase of this investigation was bare. What began as a missing person report quickly turned into one of the most disturbing cases in Australia's recent history. It was an act of violence so calculated, yet carried out with such chilling indifference, that it would haunt the community forever. There were clues that brought both fear and shock to everyone around. From the very start, investigators working Stephanie Scott's case sensed there was more under the surface. Missing person reports often leave room for hopeful outcomes, but in this case, the early clues showed a picture far too dark to ignore. Then came in the most shocking clue. The first major clue came from the school's access records. On Easter Sunday, when classrooms should have been empty, the alarm system confirmed entry by Vincent Stanford. He was a school janitor, a quiet, withdrawn man in his 20s who had passed routine background checks. Yet his alibi for the day felt thin. He admitted being there, but didn't give any real explanation for his movements or why his story didn't align with the timestamps. Detectives also noticed Stanford's behavior during questioning. He was strangely calm, unbothered by the disappearance of a teacher he worked around daily. When asked if he had seen Stephanie, he simply denied it, his tone flat and rehearsed. His affect was chillingly devoid of empathy. That in itself raised a lot of doubts. Soon, harder evidence surfaced. In his car, police found blood traces later confirmed to be Stephanie's. A search of his devices revealed even more disturbing material: violent online searches involving rape, murder, and torture. Investigators discovered that Stanford had long fantasized about killing, and Stephanie had tragically become the outlet for those fantasies. Perhaps the most horrifying discovery was made. It was on his phone. Graphic photographs taken after Stephanie's murder. These images were like a victory to him. They were proof of premeditation, showing a man who not only killed, but also wanted to preserve the act. But then questions were raised about the motive. What made him commit such a disgusting act? One suggestion was opportunistic violence. Stanford may have seen Stephanie as a convenient victim, isolated in the school on a holiday, but deeper digging showed a clear pattern. And this was frightening. Stanford had previously been investigated as a teenager for an assault. Combined with his search history, detectives began to see him less as a man who snapped, and more as someone who had long been grooming his fantasies, waiting for the moment to act. Another theory was that Stanford's employment gave him access and cover. He knew the alarm codes. He knew which classrooms were empty. He knew that on Easter Sunday, no one would interrupt him. This was not random chance, but rather it was an opportunity carefully calculated. Then clues came with the horrific discovery of the body, the discovery of Stephanie's burned remains in Cocoparra National Park, also added weight to the deliberate nature of the crime. Stanford had tried to erase the evidence by fire, transporting her body in her own car before burning it in a remote area. Yet he left behind crucial traces, which included the accelerant patterns, car tracks, and personal items that could be identified. To everyone's surprise, Stanford's own words gave investigators chilling insight. In interviews, he described the attack in clinical terms, saying he had gone a little nuts and killed her to make sure she was dead. There was no anger, no personal grudge, just the cold execution of violent urges. Theories about his psychology soon came up. Experts suggested psychopathy, which is a lack of empathy, an inability to form normal human connections, and a fixation on violence. His casual decision to eat a cheese sandwich and drink coffee after the murder seemed to confirm it. He treated killing as just another task, no different from sweeping a hallway or locking a classroom. Every clue, from digital footprints to blood evidence to behavioral analysis, narrowed the focus squarely on Vincent Stanford. Theories about jealousy, robbery, or mistaken identity were quickly discarded. The truth was far more disturbing. Stephanie Scott was the victim of a predator who had been hiding in plain sight, trusted with keys to her school, and waiting for the perfect chance to act on his darkest fantasies. By the time investigators pieced together these clues, there was no room for doubt. Stanford had not stumbled into violence. He had lived in its shadow for years. And on Easter Sunday, 2015, those shadows finally stepped into reality, leaving behind one of Australia's most haunting crime cases. When Vincent Stanford was finally charged with the rape and killing of Stephanie Scott, the community of Leeton and all of Australia waited for answers. This was not just another criminal case. It was a test of whether justice could properly respond to such a cold-blooded, senseless act. The courtroom saw a battle that brought chills to everyone around. From the outset, the evidence against Stanford was overwhelming. Prosecutors laid out a chilling timeline. He pulled Stephanie into a storage room, assaulted her, stabbed her in the neck, and left her body locked away. He was cruel and brutal to her. He then went home, ate a sandwich, and carried on as though nothing had happened. Later, he returned to dispose of her body, burning it in Cocoparra National Park. Every step of this crime was documented by physical evidence, from blood traces to photographs, leaving little room for ambiguity. The defense tried their best. The defense had few options. Stanford's lawyers did not argue that he was the killer. Instead, they focused on his mental state. They showed that he was socially isolated, prone to obsessive thoughts, and detached from reality. To make things worse, they argued that he may not have fully comprehended the horror of his actions, describing him as a young man with profound psychological issues, rather than a calculating predator. The prosecution had arguments that were alarming. The prosecution dismantled those arguments. They pointed to his violent internet searches, his prior history of aggression as a teenager, and his careful efforts to cover his tracks, burning the body, cleaning the scene, and getting rid of the evidence. This was not the behavior of someone detached from reality. This was a man who understood exactly what he was doing and who acted consciously to avoid detection. One of the most damning elements came directly from Stanford himself. In police interviews, he gave matter-of-fact descriptions of the killing, saying he had gone a little nuts and stabbed her to make sure she was dead. His flat, unemotional delivery shocked even seasoned investigators. To the jury, it left no doubt about his lack of remorse. The trial also gave voice to Stephanie's family, who spoke about her life, her upcoming wedding, and the devastating space her death left behind. Her fiancé, Aaron Leeson Woolley, had been preparing to marry her just days after the attack. Instead, he found himself grieving alongside a community shattered by betrayal of trust. The realization that a man hired to keep the school clean had instead turned it into the site of an unspeakable crime. And then came the verdict. In July 2016, Stanford pleaded guilty to both aggravated sexual assault and murder. His appeal spared the family a drawn-out trial, but it also highlighted the futility of piling any real defense. The facts were undeniable. The brutality was beyond comprehension. Justice Peter Johnson delivered the sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for killing, plus an additional 15 years for the sexual assault. He described the crime as horrific in the extreme and condemned Stanford's actions as profoundly disturbing. The court emphasized that society needed protection from someone capable of such calculated violence and that parole would never be an option. The sentencing was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief, because Stanford would never again walk free. Sorrow, because no prison term, no matter how severe, could undo the loss of Stephanie Scott. The trial also brought wider debate about safety protocols in schools. Stanford had access to alarm codes and could work unsupervised, despite his disturbing history and digital footprint. Policymakers faced huge pressure to tighten background checks and limit unsupervised access for contractors in sensitive environments. Ultimately, the trial of Vincent Stanford became a strict reminder that justice can only do so much. It can punish the guilty, but it cannot repair the lives destroyed by violence. In this case, justice meant ensuring that a dangerous predator would never again harm another innocent person. For the people of Leeton, the verdict closed one chapter. But the echoes of that Easter Sunday continued to haunt a community that lost not only a beloved teacher, but also a sense of safety that can never fully be restored. Stephanie Scott's story is one that Australia will never forget. She was a teacher filled with light, creativity, and kindness. She was days away from walking down the aisle, ready to begin a new chapter of love and family. Instead, her life was stolen in a moment of cruelty that defies comprehension. Because in the end, Stephanie Scott's story is not only about how she died, it's about how she lived, with love, with laughter, and with a passion that will never be erased by the cruelty of one man's actions.